hit it so hard.
And it's Greg. He's right on time.
Yeah. What's up?
Hello.
Oh, you're not on auto-tune?
Not today. Not this time. We have done auto-tune in the past.
Yeah, I watched one of those. I liked it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do it for like a whole hour, but I liked it.
Yeah. Well, Greg, welcome to the pod. Finally.
Yeah.
It's been a minute.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pretend that I'm not mad that it took this long. We had to go through 80 days of protests in Portland for me to be invited on, but whatever.
Okay, let me tell you.
We can pack it in now.
Let me tell you the actual story. And I could hop on the Discord and get receipts. When we started the show, like a little over a year ago, we made a list of people who we wanted to get on. And you were the chair of MADSA at the time. And so we were having this conversation, and among the people that we were trying to get on was like literally a lady that lived in a bus and was just like literally.
It's not too late for bus lady.
No,
Yeah,
it is too late, actually.
It's too late for her, actually. She's canceled. But
Damn.
we were like, I can probably get Greg Mckelvey to be on the show. And we were all like, yeah.
Yeah.
Happened, though.
But listen.
It took me having to ask. I had to ask.
Yeah, well, I do want to, like, as an addendum, just point out that if somebody answered my text messages more consistently, maybe we would have
Oh.
Not true. That's not true. The first request was like a week or two ago. So yeah, it took like a week or two, but it wasn't like
Brandon-
not bad.
Brandon's problem is that he, especially when we started this show, he didn't have any confidence in getting people on the show. Just be honest. Just be honest.
I thought you were going to say I didn't have any confidence. And
No. Just in getting people on the show specifically. You were fine. You were fine at talking. But like when I'd be like, let's get guests, you'd be like, oh, we're not good enough for guests. And I'd be like, let's just get guests. Let's just do it anyway.
And it was and I was like,
well, so I think we have
yes. And
yeah.
Kind of.
Well, so I think we have sufficiently established.
Pretty early on, so go ahead.
We did. How we rule. I think we have sufficiently established that we're old friends with Greg and that we all love each other and share in the same basket clout. But for people who haven't been friends with Greg since he was chair of Metro Atlanta DSA, this is Greg Mckelvey. He is an activist up in Portland. Are you managing or like what is your actual role for Sarah's campaign?
I'm the campaign director, which is basically a campaign manager, but since I'm the boss, I get to come up with the title, and director sounded better than manager. So I'm the campaign director. Yeah.
Yeah, less petit bourgeois like connotations.
I love it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Aren't you also Oregon Dems?
Yeah. I'm the vice chair of the Black Caucus of the Oregon Dems, which is certainly an interesting experience. Yeah. So
did they snub you as a delegate recently?
Oh yeah, and then I wanted to be a delegate for the Sanders campaign, which I was in 2016. Part of the problem was that, like in 2016, he had more delegates than Hillary in Oregon, so there was like 50 of us. I don't know. It seemed like 50. It was probably like it might have been 50 or something like that. But now in Oregon, he had like 5 delegates. And so it's not only just like more competitive, but also there were like different rules at the state level. So like my wife, Kat, couldn't run because the person from my district had to be a man, which seems like a weird rule.
Yeah. Rachel, they had the same rule in Atlanta. They have they have a male, non-male thing for the delegates now. So you have to have a slot, and the first person is male. Or I guess maybe they flipped a coin. I don't know, but yeah.
This is not how representation works. The DNC. That's not how that works. You can't just make a fucking spreadsheet and run an algorithm on it and have good representation. The DNC.
Have you seen the spreadsheet?
What if we had exactly 40% male prison guards, 40% female prison guards, 20% non-binary prison guards? Come on, Rachel. Don't you want equality?
The representation.
You need to have not just representation, but like statistically proportional representation.
Well, it's funny because then in Oregon, you would never get a black delegate. Like if we did it based on like
Right?
so like our city is, you know, I think of things in terms of the voting population, so it's not exactly accurate, but black people make up for less than 2% of the vote in Portland, Oregon. And so, which is definitely way different in Atlanta, Georgia. So like if we did that across the state is more white than Portland, so you would have no black delegates. Representation.
Do you miss Atlanta?
Yeah, right? That's what happens when you do it by algorithm.
Yeah.
Do you miss Atlanta?
Yeah.
I
Anyway,
so check this out. No, I do. Wait, check this out. I got to show you guys something.
Okay, we're ready.
Oh, this is exciting.
I love
It's a big
know.
reveal.
This is like a huge. We're
This
doing
is
like an
This
unboxing
is like a
video.
game show. Like
Yeah.
you know.
It's an unboxing. All right.
Oh, it's literally an unboxing. All right, what
So
is
I got
it?
this bag, right? This is the
Okay.
first time that this has happened since I moved back to Portland. I went to the store. This is the first time that this has been here at all, ever once in any store since I moved back. Okra. There's no okra anywhere in Oregon, and so I finally have it. And so I miss that.
Oh,
I miss the peaches. I miss the diversity. I miss y'all.
I bet you don't miss this basketball team.
No, I don't miss the basketball team. I got the best basketball team in the world. And I don't miss having to stay up until like 1 a.m. just to watch my basketball team. So
Do you feel good? Y'all are officially in now, right?
no, we have to win one of two in the play-in games. So we have to beat Memphis.
That'll be fine. I'm not anticipating y'all losing to Memphis in a play-in game. That would be very.
We almost lost to Brooklyn last night in a must-win game.
Yeah.
And they're the worst team in the bubble.
2 points.
This is not the socialist discourse that people are expecting.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
look, bread and roses and basketball.
I mean,
Well,
if
okay,
people
so
show up to Not Safe for Wonks expecting just like a normal political conversation.
We're not. We're very not normal.
No.
We don't have peaches really in Oregon that are good either.
That's heartbreaking.
No, it's really bad. Like we just got peaches for the first time too. So like I've been feeling Georgia a little bit in the past 2 days because we have peaches and okra now. Traffic is way worse in Atlanta. You're surrounded by Republicans and your state is ran by Republicans, so that's really bad. My state is ran by corporate Democrats, so we have representation in our oppression.
Right. Statistically representative oppressors.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we don't have Brian Kemp, which is bad. So
Yeah,
for
your
you.
governor is at least quasi-legitimate.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And on the national stage, I think any of our politicians, if put up against normal Democrats, are definitely more progressive. Even the ones that are, you know, that get primaried from the left and stuff like that, they're still better than most politicians. Like, even though I have a lot of not hatred, but like I really dislike the job our mayor is doing. I think that if you put him on a national stage, he would probably be more to the left than almost anybody.
That's so depressing to
Yeah.
look at your Twitter. And you just been absolutely shitting on Ted Wheeler for like months.
Ted Wheeler is not our best case scenario, but he is probably the best one that we currently
You
have.
come on,
I-
and it's like,
Least worst.
He's more progressive than Keisha Lance Bottoms for sure.
yes,
Um,
that's rough.
I mean, low bar,
and-
but
Is it? Keisha Lance Bottoms is more progressive than most Dem mayors, I'd say.
I just mean like for literally anybody who's
Yeah, literally
been
any
elected.
bar.
Yeah,
It's a
like when
yeah.
we're talking about Democrats in office, the
I-
bar for progressive is low.
I know the
Mhm.
feel. I mean, Michelle Lujan Grisham has become like a rising star, you know, and like it's kind of nice having some positive attention on New Mexico, I guess. But at the same time, it's like she's being lauded as one of like the most progressive governors in the country. And while that's technically true, it's not an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
right.
nothing to be proud of at the rate that she's pro fracking. Like, how progressive is that? You know, like.
And a lot of it, especially in Oregon, so we have like the most expensive state legislature seats in the country other than Alabama. And like in the race that I'm running right now for Portland mayor, Historically, it costs about $1 million to win that seat.
Jeez.
And you have to basically get that money through massive donations, right? And luckily, we are the first publicly financed campaign in Portland. And so we only can take and only would take money up to $250. And it has to be from an individual, which means no PACs, no super PACs, no, not even union money. 501c4 is nothing, not from the party. We can't take anything. Every single donation has to be from an individual. And the first $50 of that is matched 6-1. So $50 ends up equaling $350 for the campaign, and $250 equals $550 for the campaign, because that first 50 is the one that's matched. And so we're able to, like, I'm running a campaign right now where we basically don't have to push on fundraising at all. We're on track to hit our cap. You're only allowed to spend $580,000 in the race, in the general. But if the incumbent raised more than that, which he will not, he's currently $45,000 in the hole, then the cap would go up. So we're expecting to spend $580 in this in this general election, and he's probably would be lucky to spend $100,000. So I think we're in a pretty good spot, and we don't have to take these corporate donations at all. Like, our average donation is $40, and we're squashing him in fundraising just because of public financing. So I think it's really revolutionary for any place that could get something like this passed.
So who's doing the matching?
The city. So yeah, they have a fund. So like Atlanta could do this, right? It's not, in terms of budgets, especially as we're talking about things like police budgets, right? This is not a ton of money. My campaign will get something like $300,000 from the city, and we're the only public finance race going on right now. So our police budget is like $250 million. So you can cut from your police and move it into community and things like this. And what we've seen is way more. We just had a city council election that just ended with a public finance person winning. And it was the most diverse set of candidates that have ever ran, because so many of them were able to be competitive with public financing. We ended up with a white dude, but like, it all worked out to still have just a white dude. In his first interview, he said he's going to bring the art of compromise to Portland City Hall. So that'll be fun.
Great.
We definitely
wonderful
for that. Teresa Ryford is, I believe, running as a write-in candidate. Do you have thoughts on that? Where's all that coming from? What's the background with her?
How did y'all get wind of that from Atlanta? That's crazy.
Sure. And we follow you, so like.
Okay, yeah. So
this is like actually our job.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't tweet about her, but yeah, she's a great community force. I think it's good for her presence to be in local politics. I'm not gonna ever say anything bad about her personally. We certainly disagree on certain policies, including housing policies and zoning and stuff like that. Really wonky stuff. But at the end of the day, like I said, it takes somewhere almost $1 million to win. We just had a primary in which she was on the ballot. She came in third, top 2 advance. So I'm not worried about that. And I would never say anything bad about her. And I think her presence in our politics is good for our city. I would not pretend that it's a huge electoral factor. Like you said, it's your job, so you know that a write-in campaign can't get 170,000 votes. But but I'm not. People ask me all the time, "Are you worried about it, like, pulling from us?" If we're within that close of a margin, I would be worried. But I don't plan on running a race where we're within that close of a margin of a few thousand votes. So.
When is all of this officially going down? The election?
Same day as the presidential election. Ted's election, he was elected simultaneously with Trump. They have very similar backgrounds, and they're tied to each other on the ballot forever.
Has he helped himself over the last few months, or has he hurt himself?
Yeah, so we had polling in June that had the race tied. which is amazing because in the primary, he almost got the 50% he would need. But our polling had the race tied in his unfavorable rating at 41%. And since then, we've had this wave of protests, mishandling of the coronavirus, which I think is happening with every elected official across the country,
Right.
more so in your state, but and in New Mexico's doing a pretty good job, I think. Portland's doing really bad. I think the whole country has this, like, we want to reopen, right? And so, no, he hasn't helped himself, mostly because of the protests. And we are in 80 days of him gassing, beating, and arresting protesters. And then we had this weird period of, a week where we had him coming out and saying tear gas from Portland police is good, tear gas from Donald Trump's police is bad. Hashtag resistance. And so it didn't fly. It didn't fly even with people who are not out in the streets, because we're constantly, the whole city is waking up every day to images of police brutality. And the protests are going to continue because each day becomes a protest of the previous day's police actions. So if as long as the police are still out there beating people, it's making more people come out into the streets. And this all could have also stopped if they would have cut from the police budget what the community was demanding, which was $50 million. I'm sure they've spent more than that in this time frame just policing these protests. And if he could go back in time and someone told him, hey, the protests are going to stop if you heed the community demands and do 50 million. I think he would have done it. But we also had polling on the 50 million number, and most people in Portland wanted 50 million cut from the police and put into communities of color. They ended up cutting something like 20 million. And it's like, so now you've just made everybody mad. So the people that want like substantial cuts are really upset because one, they demonize those people throughout the entire time. And then two, the people who don't want any cuts are also mad that you've cut 20. So you've made nobody happy. And that's really exactly what Ted Wheeler is. He goes into every situation trying to be a negotiator, the art of compromise, right? And try and make everybody happy. But what he ends up doing is making nobody happy and everybody mad. And what he's incapable of doing is going to somebody in a meeting and saying, look, this is where I'm at. I hear you that you're right here. I'm not moving from this one spot. Let's see where we can find some middle ground. He'll go into that meeting and just talk about the middle ground, and then go to a meeting with the opposite side and do the same thing, and then go do something that makes both sides mad. So instead, yeah, go ahead.
That's such a systemic problem within the Democratic Party, generally speaking, right? Like their entire sort of ethos and MO is around compromising before you even get to the table. And so every single one of them is in this sort of like Bugs Bunny, Elmer Fudd line in the sand dynamic. And they will never stop. Yeah, exactly.
They create the line when there doesn't need to be one. So things like nationally that we know that people support, like Medicare for all and single payer healthcare, increasing the minimum wage. Like Democrats are like, okay, where's the compromise here? But the voting public isn't in a compromising state. We already know what we need here.
Right. We did Obamacare. It was bad.
Yeah.
Like that was the one. It didn't work. Give us what we want. We want fucking Medicare for all. Like.
Yeah. It's horrible,
that
especially
is the crazy
now.
part when people talk about compromising on that particular issue. It's like we already did. Like
they took out the public option. Like that was the compromise. They took out the public option, and then like because of that, everything has been dismantled. It's so bad.
Yeah, just absolutely horseshit. Like, and it's ridiculous too. And I mean, it really comes down to, I think, them generally existing in this sort of insular, neoliberal, faux progressive bubble. Where like they have exclusively superficial conversations about these things. It's just taken as a given that like there is some holy writ that anything that is publicly run is bad. Anything that is owned by the people is bad. And the only way you can actually get anything done is with a handful of like important men, you know, great historical men who just solve things for everybody else. Like, and that's not how it actually works. It's never worked like that. They're just completely high on their own brand.
And yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who like wholeheartedly subscribe to those politics. And also, when you talk about Obamacare, you have like a political party that is completely built around finding like a polished version of a compromise you made like literally 12 years ago at this point. It's just a ways back and it's very dated. So listen, when I talked to somebody and I said that you were going to be on, and I asked them, do you have any questions about Portland? The question that they gave me was an interesting one. And they said, why Portland? Because like the United States is a very large country. There are people everywhere in the country that are outraged by all of the police brutality that we've seen over years. What is unique in the character of Portland, Oregon, that it's become like the flashpoint for the movement nationally?
Wow, yeah, I could teach a semester on this. But so let's do the thesis statement first. Is because of our historical institutional racism and the way that we've either tried to or failed to reckon with it. The same thing we were talking about with Democrats and them wanting to compromise on everything, even if there is not, even if the voting public doesn't want to compromise. And then also just this, protesting is part of Portland's culture and ethos and has been for a very long time. So if we quickly run through these, so the reason why Oregon is so not diverse in part is because we were founded as a state in which Black people could not be in at all. And we were founded not as a slave state. And some Oregonians like to hold this up like we had an option and we could have tried to be a slave state. We tried not to be. That wasn't because of any moral virtue. That was because Oregonians did not want to live next to Black people, slave or not. It was founded specifically, quote unquote, as a white utopia. And so it was illegal for Black people to be here for so long. So as some Black people are moving westward, they're going to California, some going north to Seattle, etc. They're not coming to Portland. Then when Black people start coming to Portland, they're coming to build ships for World War II in the Kaiser shipyards. And they all are living in this one city called Vanport, Oregon. And it's on the border of Portland. It's basically Portland, but Portlanders didn't want Black people in their city. And because of a lack of infrastructure, similar to Flint, Michigan, the whole city flooded and dozens of people died, but the whole city flooded. It's just completely underwater. It's completely wiped out, gone, like worse than Katrina. Everything is gone in one day. And so everybody then is forced with the decision to be displaced in the Portland area or go back south or east, and or go Seattle or San Francisco or LA or something like that along the West Coast. And so the Black people that remained, unlike many cities where there's like a Black neighborhood that has been there since the 40s or the 20s or something like that, ours flooded. And so they're scattered around. So there's not like one extremely Black neighborhood or something like that, right? So because of that, representation has been really bad. We don't have districted seats. We have citywide elections. And so police were allowed to basically be as racist as possible throughout our history. And then, of course, we have racist zoning and stuff that kept Black people in certain areas and they're overly policed, etc. So we have this horrible racist institutionalized history that makes us very white. And we have a lot of white guilt about that too. That I think is a contributor to people being in the streets as well. But it also leads to us having a lack of Black leaders, which makes a awkward situation at protests. But it allows us to almost have leaderless movements in the streets because there's only so many people that are like Black that can show up with a megaphone and run a protest, right? So and that has created something beautiful, I think, in that we have leaderless protests where people show up like in these spontaneous ways. It's really, it's something that I think has not existed in other cities. So in the morning, a post goes out that's like, this is the location for the protest. Like one thing that's been said at protests recently is like, no gods, no idols, no megaphones, right? And it's so different than how we think of protests across the country, right? This isn't your like, we're going on a march. Like we have that also, but that's not what these 80 days of protests have been. It's been like literally confrontations with the police, not like we're just marching around. And then the last thing is we're a really progressive city. We're allowed to be progressive in rhetoric in part because we don't have to reckon with our racist past because there's not enough Black people to force us to be actually equitable. And so because of that, we get to be really woke in rhetoric, which I think allows for this protest culture. But we've had this protest culture for a long time. The site of the Justice Center is actually where the IWW workers used to organize. And that site was ripped from them and torn down because the state legislature made it illegal for there to be revolutionary organizing. And so like that history is right there where the center of these protests is. And then they built the Justice Center on top of that years later. George H.W. Bush coined us Little Beirut because we were shit talking him when he came here before. And we've sort of used that calling card ever since then. And we're just a big protest city. And then, sorry, I know I'm filibustering, but this
is actually continue.
The last thing is just like Donald Trump wanted to make a example of Portland and sort of show that he wants to like liberate Portland from radical anarchist agitators, the alt-right has sort of come into Portland and had these mini Charlottesville rallies since the election. So the 2016 election. And so we've had all these instances where our like Antifa and anti-fascists in general are just facing down with these alt-right groups almost monthly. And then police, I think, as with in many cities, will have their backs to the alt-right, face down the anti-fascist protesters, and eventually crack down upon them with like tear gas and arrests and violence. And so that has made this tension between the types of people that go out and protest and the police that much like more vitriolic, which has, I think, spurred a lot of the emotion that we see poured out into our streets.
So I want to just mention that you talked about leaderless movements in Portland and, you know, no guys, no masters, no megaphones. It is so clouded in Atlanta. It's so cloud-based. Like we had a protest at the governor's mansion, and I swear to God above, there was somebody that was like, had a megaphone and just brought the megaphone and just started talking. And like at these protests, it's so like disorganized. I don't even mean that in a derivative way, just like so disorganized that if you show up with a megaphone, people will assume that you are in charge of shit. So this dude showed up with a megaphone, started plugging his gram. Like I was like, what are you doing?
Which is amazing. Every time I see something like that, I'm like, honestly, respect the grift. Like that's I can only be so bad.
Concerning the grift, you absolutely do not.
No, never.
But
yeah, to be clear, don't do this.
Also, like in addition to the clout plugging, like yeah, people just bring business cards. People do all sorts of like goofy shit, and there's no discipline.
So that is incredibly, I think we had to reckon with that earlier and more directly because of our lack of diversity. And so we had that, but imagine most of the protest is white and it's a black person that comes with the megaphone. And these people have been chanting, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. I mean, we literally had a situation where the protests are mostly white, of course, because Portland is mostly white. Right. And I saw a video of a black person on a megaphone saying all lives matter. And like these white people, like their brains are going to explode because they're like, yo, we thought like that this was like all black people were on the same page here on this. And it's like because and so we're forced to sort of reckon with how we think about representation and identity politics. I think I am further on the pro identity politics than most like socialists actually are, which might have got me in trouble in Atlanta, or maybe it got me elected. I don't know. But I think that I am like, so I do think it matters. I think representation matters, etc. But we had to really think about, you know, that doesn't mean you vote for Herman Cain, right? It doesn't mean you vote for Kamala Harris, right? Like, so representation matters. But yeah.
The logical gap there that like white people are making, or that they have when they do stuff like this, is they assume this like overly obsequiously deferential attitude towards Black opinions, you know, just because they are Black and for no other reason. And what sort of fuels that is, I mean, a very earnest desire to like understand the power dynamics at play and like be mindful of them and be respectful and to create space for people, which is good. But then on the other hand, you know, when you go so far along that train of thought to you are no longer even critically thinking about these things or engaging with this person as a person, like that's objectifying. You know, that's not actually interacting with a human being as a human being. It's every bit as alienating and othering as if you were completely ignoring them.
I mean, so everybody has this line for themselves. And I saw a tweet that mentioned this. Like, everybody has a line where, regardless of race, you are not going to support that person's opinion. And we all have that line because, you know, we're not here retweeting Candace Owens. So there were some people who are on my timeline like, oh, I can't really cuss out Kamala Harris because despite me not agreeing with her on policy, it's like a historic moment or whatever. All of us like have to individually reckon with where we choose to open fire or whatever and draw that line on when somebody is outside of the covenant and we need to either A, attack them, or B, denounce them, or politely ignore them or whatever. And it's just a very complicated issue and you never have like 100% right answer. But what I will say is, I don't know to the degree that white people are like deferential to Black opinions when they don't suit the purposes that they have already going in. It's not like if you find like a Black person that's like to the left of them, they'll be like, well, you know, I'm not comfortable with this, but you're Black and I really trust your opinion on that. You never hear that shit. It's always like, well, this person agrees with me and they're Black. I got to listen to them. Sorry. And then somebody's like, there are other Black people that, nope, too late. Pick the Black person. It's over. We did it. So it's just
that basically.
Well, to be clear,
Portland.
I don't think that like this is like the most sort of traditional sense of like philosophical bad faith, right? Like I don't think that these people are responding to Blackness this way because they are earnestly doing it. They earnestly want to like look like they're doing it. And they don't understand the actual mechanisms that create that sort of healthy and like reciprocally respectful dynamic.
Yeah, that's
so like I what you said I totally agree with. And also I would add that nuance. Anyway.
That's that
Marvel
movies.
Not great.
Yeah, it's the Marvel movie logic. It's who's on the poster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to put it.
The other factor that we don't really think about is like it's easier for white people to be politically pure because they have less invested in it. It's easier for them to recover from political losses. Like it's easier for somebody, let's say like Jeff Merkley, our senator from Oregon, was an early endorser of Bernie Sanders in the 2016 race when most senators, I think he was the first superdelegate to endorse Sanders in 2016. Like it's easy for him to be recovered in the party for that pure stance because he's a white dude. But like if and then so we're mad at like the John Lewises of the world when he was alive for not being like as ideologically pure, but it's not as easy. I mean, look at Jesse Jackson. Like Jesse Jackson, there's a reason why he's not on the poster, and it's because he was willing to be far on the left. And so it's like we like we have these purity tests and we're not applying them equitably because Black people have also, especially in places that are like in Oregon that are mostly white, have had to learn to work within this system forever. And it's the only way that they've even been able to get to a point where they're in contention to be on the poster. And they're less likely to want to throw away their chance to be on the poster. And I'm not saying that's okay or right. But we're not like factoring that into our anger with Black politicians when they're not perfect, because it's easier for white people to take principled stances because they have less consequences for that.
Rachel.
Well, so this seems like kind of a convenient segue to talk about the presidential election a little bit. You know, Kamala Harris obviously just got picked for VP. There are some ways that that is actually a really powerful and good thing. There are some ways that she's a fucking cop, you know, and I just want to sort of get your thoughts on it and see, you know, broadly, like, what are your plans for the election? How are you feeling about it? You know, pro, against? It's really nuanced, actually, you know.
I think for everybody it's nuanced. Even the people that post Kamala as a cop, they're more nuanced than Kamala as a cop, right? They just and you know, maybe I'm not posting that though because I don't think it serves me right now. It doesn't help me to. I don't need to prove I'm pure or something like that. Like I don't care. And so I think even most of the people that say Kamala is a cop plan on voting for her. So, but I worry that your vote is less impactful on the election than your rhetoric about Kamala Harris. And so because of that, I am going to save most of my criticisms for her for when she was in the primary and then lost, and then for November 4th. And then, you know, there are strategic ways, obviously, to push politicians to the left. And I think that progressives have done a fucking amazing job of doing that. Like minimum wage going up and stuff, becoming more of a part of the platform. I mean, even look what Andrew Yang was able to do with like universal basic income and how quickly that advanced through the discussion. And just things, universal health care, right? Like that stuff, we're doing a good job of pushing the party platform left. Maybe it's not fast enough. Maybe it's not pure enough. Maybe we need our own party. I don't know. But I do think that Donald Trump is an existential crisis. And so I want him to lose. And that is going to be a bigger priority for me right now than proving to somebody how pure I am because I understand the critiques of Kamala Harris. That said, there's obviously incredibly valid critiques of Kamala Harris, but I don't see it was weird to me because the same thing I was just talking about. We have this on the left, like we love these reformer DAs as long as they're white dudes. We have one in Portland, and I promise you that every single DA, regardless of they're a reformer or not, is still disproportionately locking up Black people like that and putting Black people in cages. That is happening no matter how good a prosecutor is. So if Kamala is a cop, then so is Amy Klobuchar, but for some reason that hashtag didn't take off, right? And here I'll really
we did try to do that on our Twitter. I'll just say.
Okay. But I'll go a step further. I'll go a step further and really piss people off. I guarantee you, nobody who is in elected office is absolved of institutional racism in any elected office because they are part of the institution, right? Like nobody is pure there, including Bernie Sanders. Like Bernie Sanders is a mayor, was a mayor, and mayors are as responsible as DAs for locking up Black people. And so I guarantee you, I mean, I haven't looked at the statistics and there probably was little he could have done about it, but I promise that the cops were not amazing in Burlington, Vermont when he was the mayor. Like the cops were not just good cops, right? And he still had a lot of pull over those police officers. So I think we have this standard of who was involved in institutional racism and who wasn't, that disproportionately impacts the same people that we're pretending to care the most about. And so, she was a cop, and that's not good. And like, that's not who I would choose to run our country. But Donald Trump is like literally the worst thing. Like, I would vote for my Pomeranian before I would vote for Donald Trump. So,
ham sandwich. Ham sandwich would be a great president.
I saw y'all's
ham sandwich would not drone strike anybody.
I saw y'all's tweet and the dude literally picked the one person who you should not vote for over Trump and was like, I don't care if Hitler was the vice president. And it's like, yo, that was the only wrong answer.
It's unbelievable.
You do have to draw a line somewhere. Like I'm not offended by people drawing the line in different places than I do, right? Like I don't if somebody says my line's here and I say my line's here, like that's okay, but you have to draw it somewhere. When you say I'll vote for Hitler before Trump, the line, you don't have a line anymore. There's nothing left. There's nothing left. Like, I don't.
Well, it's like its own complete, like, perfect, unique, discrete telos, right? It's like there is nothing in your universe except for your desire to specifically remove Donald Trump from the Oval Office. And it's like, that's it. That's the only thing that any of them care about anymore. It's like the only thing that they think. It's the only thing they eat. It's the only thing they sleep. They wake up in the morning and their first thought and last thought before they go to sleep is Orange Man bad, and it's consuming them and turning them into like actual pod people. It's incredible.
Well, and when we talk about stuff like, okay, we're going to maybe be able to hold Biden and Kamala somewhat accountable, maybe get them to like do a few things. And like, I don't want to get into whether that's possible or not really like as a deep convo. I'm just saying like, that's a conversation a lot of people are having on Twitter right now. Right. And just in general, is like, can we like, if we get these people in the office, can we get them to like, at least maybe get a few balls across the finish line for us if we put enough pressure on them. Right. And like, you know, there's no question that like, you know, if you believe that at all, that like there has to be a standard, like I say, because you have to have that option. Otherwise, it's just the same thing. Like if we're putting someone into office that absolutely is not going to push any balls across the finish line, then like that we're not accomplishing anything. And that's one of my concerns when we talk about this pressure, is that I feel like a lot of people that are like, just like, I want Trump out, aren't going to be putting that pressure on these people. No, you know what I mean? Like, so like, and it's like, it's sort of awful in a way, because Obama radicalized so many people towards the left in a lot of ways, right? Like, because we were all looking at this president who was supposed to be doing things for us and it wasn't happening. And it made a lot of people wonder, why aren't these things happening? Why is this person who ran on the platform of change and spoke the language that we wanted to hear unable to deliver any of the things that we're asking for? And so like that pushed a lot of people to the left. And it's like, in some ways, one of the worst things about Donald Trump is that he has this ability to sort of wash the Democrats' hands clean to a lot of people. And that's like one of my biggest concerns. And so like, that's like, when I think about this, like, we got to put the pressure on. It's like, we can't put the pressure on if you're letting Donald Trump wash the Democrats' hands clean. And that's when I see people saying, let's vote for Hitler instead of Trump. That's what you're doing, folks.
First of all, there are people in the recent history of the United States that are much worse than Donald Trump. George W. Bush was a much worse president than Donald Trump. If Bush and Trump are running for office and those are my only two options, I'm voting Trump. Like George Bush.
Oh man.
Well,
listen, I will handle that when that election inevitably happens, because we live in the worst timeline and this is hell. When that election happens, I want you to know I'm going to approach it basically the same way as I have this one, which is with the grim realization that our votes mostly don't count anyway, so who gives a shit? Go to mutual aid.
I'll be one of those libs talking about, do you want to put Bush in office? Like, not only was George Bush, not only was
he did 9/11. Do you want the guy who did 9/11 in office?
Not only was George Bush like a thoroughly evil like dude, but also wielded institutional power much more effectively than Donald Trump did. Oh, this is easy to explain, because George Bush was better at being evil than Trump was.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has no federal government. He's radical. He's hollowed the whole thing out and filled it with like his own sycophants that are incredibly incompetent. George W. Bush had like the evil all-star team. He had the 92 dream team of evil, like in his State Department, in his Defense Department, in every cabinet level was like literally engineered from the ground up to destroy those public institutions.
Just an army of Kissinger clones.
And in a lot of ways, we are still coping with damage that George W. Bush did to the country like years ago. That's not even talking about foreign policy.
That's certainly true, because Donald Trump is incompetent. Like, nobody's going to debate that. I think that, and maybe this isn't fully Donald Trump's fault, I would certainly vote for George W. Bush over Donald Trump. I would vote for Mitt Romney. I would kill for Mitt Romney over Donald Trump, because I think that Donald Trump is, like I said, an existential threat to our country, because he's breaking down the institutions that we're going to need for progressive change going forward in the future. So like, our elections might not matter, right? Like George Bush, at least nobody was worrying about if George Bush loses in 2004, is he going to leave peacefully or not, right? Like I'm worried about that for
That's not
Donald
true.
Trump.
That's no, stop. I
Okay,
gotta
I don't know.
stop you.
Maybe I
I'm
was
sorry.
wrong.
This is a big thing that I will fight anyone and everyone on.
Sure, let's do it.
Bush in both 2004 and 2008 proposed suspending the election. He proposed it in 2004 because of the Iraq War specifically. In 2008, he was talking about doing it via FEMA powers. So he actually proposed two different ways to do it.
Proposed. It's more like he floated the ideas than proposed. But I don't. It certainly wasn't a part
2004, especially though. Look back on it.
Yeah.
He was
pretty
serious.
Bloomberg almost did it for the mayor. But I also think that it's important. I don't want to seem like the fucking patriotic American, but
it's okay. Go ahead.
What he's done to the culture of our country, and polarized it to the extent he I think is really dangerous. And I might be just more sensitive to it because I feel like we've been on the brink of mass murder at so many of these Portland protests that lead to something that is just so fucking dangerous for our country. And so and I don't think that that's going to come from these people that are effective Republicans. I mean, we had this debate with impeachment, right? Like, do you really think Mike Pence is going to be worse or better? And like a lot of people are saying Mike Pence would be worse because he would be more effective, because he's an actual politician, because he's like he's smart, right? Like he's evil, but he's smart.
Compared to Donald Trump. Like we're keeping the ball.
But the way that Donald Trump has fans that are literally willing to kill for him, right? That the way that he is altered what is true and what is facts versus alternative facts. The coronavirus, like being a hoax, like this is like absurd stuff that I think would have been different and less deadly had we had a competent evil Republican.
I will say this about Trump. I will say this for sure about Trump is that his rhetoric is very violence inciting. He is empowering the white nationalists directly with his rhetoric in a way that George Bush did not. I'm not sure if that makes him worse to me, but I do agree with you that there's something really important there that is very like frightening and like I mean, we've seen it all over the country with these white nationalists showing up to protests. And like, it's like when Trump blows that whistle, they come, they don't wait for another order. Like they don't need any further instruction. They just go. And there is an extreme danger to that. And I do want to make sure that that's deeply acknowledged. Like I might be like, orange man bad sometimes because I'm an ironic leftist, but real talk, this is an extreme danger. And I think that that's worth talking about.
But we went through an entire primary where people are saying that basically Joe Biden is George Bush, right? Like, so how are we like squaring these two things? Because we've gone through an entire primary where people are like, Joe Biden is just like the Republicans, right? And it seems like it's the same faction who would say that Donald Trump is not as bad as George Bush.
Right. Well, I actually kind of want to circle back around to that.
Your faction, Brandon, so you can defend it if you want. But is that true or is that not true?
I've never said that Biden was equivalent to a Republican. The only candidate that I've said we've got to burn the party down if they get nominated is Bloomberg. And I said we've got to kneecap it. We've got to just completely drive the shit into a ditch.
Great. Well, I want to put you in the position to be the patriotic American then. So tell me how Joe Biden is different than a Republican.
So I'm actually going to take a step back from that and push back against a previous point you were making, right? And I honestly, I don't know exactly where I'm going to land with this. I'm still not sure if I'm going to vote. I still am not sure.
You have to vote. You're in a potential swing state.
No, we fucking aren't. No, we aren't. Brian Kemp is in charge of this election too, and I'll get back to that. I am coming back around to all of this, I swear.
James, I see you.
So what you're talking about is this sort of broad sense that things have accelerated. And I think that's very true. Everything has accelerated in the last 4 years to a fever pitch. And it's really fucking bad. And it's horrific, right? The other side of that argument, and again, I am describing this and don't know if I buy into it, is that the longer things remain sort of tenable and tolerable, the longer it's going to take to make these changes, and in aggregate, more people are going to get hurt. I don't actually know. I would have to actually look at fucking numbers to have an opinion on that. But I think that's sort of the difference in the approaches, right?
That's too dangerous, though. Like that.
Right.
It's too deadly and too dangerous. And we, yeah. So I think so. Republicans and corporate Democrats are very capable and good at wielding these institutions for their own will, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that's what the part of the point that Brandon is making is that George W. Bush was very competent in wielding the institutions that exist in America for evil. And sometimes Democrats do that too. So, and I think all of us would agree to a somewhat lesser extent. What I think though is that progressives can use those institutions too once we build electoral and political power. And that where we're at right now is Donald Trump is incapable of wielding these institutions. I mean, take the post office for example, and therefore, or the Department of Education, anything, and therefore instead of wielding them for evil, just destroys them and burns them to the ground. And now they're not there for anybody, and we're left with this this horrible world in which we just have to fight it out physically. And so that is why I think Trump is worse.
And I think that's a really valid reason to call him worse, right? I also feel this sense of it, like in Georgia specifically, right? Because when we talk about like the power of a vote, right, we're also talking about the like efficacy and accuracy of our balloting systems and the way we do elections, and sort of how all these things are managed. If we have an election in November, which I'm not 100%, I'm like 85% sure we will. And there's like that 15% that sometimes feels maybe a little bit bigger that's like, he might just not do it. We might just not. Like, the Georgia primary got delayed. We might just delay things until, but if the election happens at all, right, your first consideration is, are you in a swing state, right? If you are in like a very red or very blue state, your vote really mostly doesn't matter. Like, most people are not educated enough about politics to have the kinds of like really granular objections that wonks have. And I think that if in that case, and I mean, I'm not saying don't vote for like local, always vote local. Local elections, actually, your vote does matter, but presidential elections specifically, like, I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. And if you're in a state like Georgia, where at this point, our elections are so fundamentally compromised and suppression is so obscene here, that it's like you're literally going to be conceivably risking your life to vote at all for the sake of an election that's probably not even going to be accurately recorded because we're using these machines that are known to have massive holes in their security, and there's no paper balloting. And we already know that the current governor got there because he ran his own election and did it shady as shit. When we talk about the extensive suppression in a place like Georgia, like we say, oh, it's like gonna flip. No, it's not. It's not gonna flip. What they're gonna do is they're gonna like hit it at like just 47% or like 46% and say, oh, it was so close. But like, no, like they're gonna fucking suppress it. They're gonna do what they need to do to get it like just low enough that it's plausible.
So go ahead.
Well, do you think it was good that Stacey Abrams had a really competitive run?
Yeah.
I think that was good for the state of Georgia, and I think that was in part because the Democratic Party funneled money into it and thought that it was competitive. And so even if you don't win Georgia, keeping it competitive, I think, is good even for the local level races. And then I also think that people in Michigan in 2016 thought the very same thing, that their state was like a safe blue state. And there were many states that we lost in part because, and mostly because Hillary didn't campaign there, but because they thought it was safe. And so I think the idea either that it's safe red or safe blue in a time period where we think that this might be an existential crisis, it's worth just voting. But also, like, I'm in a state where I get to vote by mail. Like, I only get to vote by mail, and so I don't have to risk my life to vote. So it's easier for me to say.
So without bogging down into a huge, like, we've gone from having this really fascinating discussion about Portland to now we're talking about the fucking prisoner's dilemma of national politics. I think we think about Georgia kind of in the same way that Republicans think about like Jersey. It's like, well, if things break right and if it's a wave election, there are Republicans in Jersey, and maybe like it goes one way. Back in the day, Howard Dean advocated for something called a 50-state strategy, which turns out that was kind of seen as prohibitively expensive, but was just running candidates every possible place that you can, that is customized towards the need of the state. And obviously that's very good for building any kind of national awareness of any platform. That's one of the reasons why socialists run everywhere possible, even in places where it's, Idaho or Tennessee or Louisiana, or places where you think, oh, they're not going to win. Well, first of all, those people do win local offices sometimes. And also it helps build awareness, especially in states like Texas that you're kind of counting on in the future. In terms of Biden versus the Republicans, I think everybody should be extremely disturbed by Joe Biden's foreign policy. He's literally like never seen a war that he did not like. However, when it comes to domestic policy, he is just like, if you go issue by issue, is mostly better than any Republican. So, I mean, that's totally fine. But I also think you only have one vote and you've got to use it in a way that your conscience can rest with. And we did a whole strategic voting episode. So I don't want to go through the arguments for and against everybody. But
go check that out.
It's a good episode.
nsfwonks.podbean.com or anywhere where podcasts are otherwise available.
I'll be back in 3 minutes. You guys.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'll respond to you while you're away. And then I can say a bunch of mean stuff and you can't come back at me and I'll be right by default.
Let's just say mean stuff about Brandon for 3 minutes.
Brandon,
Greg,
sounds like 2 months.
you got a Brandon diss.
No, okay, so but like to respond to Brandon, I agree with what Brandon is saying, especially in part about elections primarily at this stage being useful for disseminating ideas and for sort of bringing light on and bringing concepts into the national discourse, right? Especially because we know, like, you don't win your first election. So we have all these socialists who are running this election cycle. Most of us didn't make it. So that's at least 2 to 4 more years, or 6 even, depending on what you're like trying to go for, where you didn't get that office. And nobody wins the first time, right? So we kind of have this like 6-year minimum before we can meaningfully make these impacts. And I don't know if we have like 6 years. Like, and that's the other part of it that makes me feel so, I guess, like, not disdainful of electoral politics, because like I appreciate them in theory, right? But like, I guess disenchanted. Like, I feel very disenchanted with the process right now because I don't think we have the time it takes to win elections, you know? And so for me, I have sort of reached this stage where I just want to start working on building dual power institutions. I want to start directly providing these things for each other in the community without the government, because frankly, I think that'll get people into safe situations a lot sooner.
It's the only place where progressives can actually like use power. I think that also all of us exist in this bubble that's on Twitter, like this left bubble, and there is an incredibly outsized opinion of our influence on politics. Like when people were like so mad about Kamala Harris and they're like, oh, now you've lost the election. What the fuck are you talking about?
Exactly.
No, like,
we're not that
important. Yeah,
we're
not that
talking
important in electoral politics. And they're saying that progressives are the base of the party. The part of the party that threatens to sit out every election is not the base of the party. The base of the party is black women and black people, especially older black people. Like that's the base of the party because they float the Democrats above every single election. They vote consistently, and if they don't, you lose. Like in 2016, that's the actual base of the party, and that's like we're not that important electorally yet, and so we need to build that. We're not going to build it on Twitter being mad about the fact that we're being disrespected. We're being disrespected because we fucking lose.
Yeah, which is important, right? It's important to have that fucking reality check.
This is like what Adriel Hampton has been on.
Like, we will win when we earn the win, and we haven't done it yet. And so this like fixation we have on electoral politics, when right now people think of us as a bunch of like angry 21-year-olds who need to get off the internet, right? That's not going to win us elections either. So for me, like the reason I have been downplaying elections generally and saying like it matters, but it doesn't matter that much, is because we've got like 5 years to figure this shit out. And we have to persuade people to believe that we know what we're doing. And the only way we're going to do it right now is if we actually just physically do it. If we just do outside of like actual government, outside of these like institutions, take care of people and organize the people themselves on the ground to solve these problems for our communities in real time.
Rachel,
That is how we prove to people that we need to be in charge, and that's how we win the election.
Rachel,
It's not about like getting mad about Kamala Harris or whatever.
Rachel, would you agree that building an alternate shadow economy is harder than electing Bernie Sanders to be the Democratic Party nominee? Okay, because generally,
but we can do very visible things that are going to have way more immediate impact.
Hold on, let's stop for a second. Gregory Mckelvey, you have to leave us shortly.
Yeah, I do. Oh, wait. Yeah, so I guess I get to filibuster this point for just 1 second. It is, but I mean, what we do have is the power of the protest, which I don't know how effective it has been in Atlanta, but it's been very effective here. We cut $20 million from the police department, which obviously was not what we wanted, but it was something that would have never happened without protest, and is a huge thing. And we've referred a accountability measure to the ballot, like those types of things. You can shake a city to its core with less than 1,000 people. You don't need to win an election. So to be most effective. And if we spend all of our time worried about Bernie Sanders, we're not going to be able to do those things. All right, I have to go, y'all. It's been fun. If you don't ask me back soon, I'll block all of y'all.
Come back in a couple weeks.
Please come back in a week.
You want like a regular spot? We got it.
I want to be on as often as possible. I like talking with y'all. All right. Brandon, while you were gone, Rachel said that you were only the second best chair in the past 2 years of Atlanta DSA. She said you were the second best.
I said he smells like 2 butts, not second best chair, 2 butts.
Hey,
second best.
At least I was second. It could have.
All right, y'all. Oh, that's fucked up. All right.
All right. Thank y'all very much. Thank you for coming, Greg.
Appreciate it. I'll be back soon.
And we'll sign out. We'll do all of that stuff for you. It's Greg Mckelvey. Love having him on here. We got all that good Portland history knowledge. And y'all, the chat, y'all started talking about who started talking about Kamala. Was that Rachel? We got into Kamala.
We were talking specifically about like purity politics and identity politics. And like when people make decisions around like identity and purity, and it seems very appropriate to relate to the current event of Kamala Harris.
Listen, we'll have Gregory Mckelvey back soon for sure.
We'll talk about how cops are bad just any other time. It'll be fine.
Cops are bad.
Cops.
And you take nothing else away with you.
Cops bad, Orange Man bad, George Bush bad.
Hitler also bad.
Hitler bad. These are some lessons from today. We appreciate everybody tuning in as always. We are not safe for wonks. Our guest today was Gregory Mckelvey. If y'all don't follow him on Twitter, he's at Gregory Mckelvey.
More people are following him than following our podcast.
Hey, I'm gonna plug the guest, Brandon.
Don't plug him.
You know what?
He might watch this later, and he's gonna be like,
"Oh, yeah, that's true."
Wondering why we were so.
He's so great.
Quick shout out to if you live in Portland and you were voting for mayor, Sarah Iannarone, I think is how you say it. She's really cool. Greg has been working for her. If you like Greg's politics, you will like her politics as well. So please consider voting for her. And
Correct.
Yeah.
And if you like our politics, please consider voting for us at patreon.com/notsafe.
I love it.
Vote with your dollars.
Yes. This is the invisible hand of the market, and it's out begging for money.
But seriously, we are a 100% independent media co-op that promotes marginalized voices, and that is 100% just funded by, basically our own pockets and whatever we get from viewers like you. It makes a huge difference in what we're able to do as a show, not just in terms of the media that we produce, but also we try to use this money in various ethical ways. And like one of the things that we're working on right now is actually a chair that will be more accessible for Rachel to sit in,
but a different chair.
Yes, like a literal physical chair,
like an actual chair. Yeah.
Rachel might look absolutely fabulous on camera all the time, but that doesn't mean that her body doesn't have some issues that could use accommodation, and a special chair that accommodates her disabilities would be a huge step for her. I don't want to just speak to your needs entirely, Rachel, if you want to say
it's true.
something, but
I
speak for women, and it's good. Go ahead.
I have a disorder pending genetic testing of confirmation, which, you know, kind of got put off because of the plague. We suspected is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which basically means that my DNA is fucked up and it makes collagen wrong. And as a consequence, all of my muscles and joints hurt like all of the time. And it sucks. But if I could get a really like nice sort of reclining desk, I could still be here doing things, recording stuff, and I wouldn't have to be like dosing myself with huge amounts of painkillers to do it, which would be great. You know, anything I can do to sort of decrease my reliance on pharmaceuticals is awesome. And if y'all help me raise that money, that is what will happen with it, and it'll be great, and I'll be super grateful. And honestly, even if we don't get there immediately, I'm so grateful for everybody who's already giving us money. Thank you, patrons. You are all so fabulous.
Yep. A lot of new patrons this week. We appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
I should have had the names up for thank yous, but I'll do thank yous on Monday. When I wear the banana suit. But patrons, we really appreciate it. And we just want you guys to kind of know that, like, you know, this is some of the kind of stuff that the money goes towards, is like real important stuff for people like us who are struggling.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for watching / listening as always. If you want more, we just dropped an audio episode today with Adriel Hampton and Lauren Nicole. Go check that out. We will be back on Monday at 4 Eastern with another live stream as always. And we will see you next time. Bye.